Hey everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap for the past week. We have a few interesting items this week, including more news on the DRAM and NAND shortage as it continues to roll through 2018. It looks like news on new mining-specific cards from the board partners of AMD at least, maybe more coming later. And then some discussion about updates to Blender, updates for power supplies, memory, X299 stuff, and maybe a bit of discussion on Vega Hype as it stands right now. Before getting to that, this coverage is brought to you by iFixit.com and their Pro Tech Toolkit, which is a 64-bit toolkit that contains an anti-static strap and all the tools required to disassemble most PC hardware as we've shown. You can go to iFixit.com/GamersNexus and use code GamersNexus at checkout for $5 off. The first topic is just on Vega Hype in general. So in the past week, there's been some more news, some actual new coverage coming out about Vega, or specifically the Vega FE version, and that has had attached to it a lot of hype from the community. A lot of, this will beat the Titan XP, this will beat the 1080 Ti, this will do all these things. But just a reminder, wait, just wait for reviews, wait till people can actually test it. Hyping things up is only going to do one thing, and that is lead to disappointment. So we would recommend just tone it down a little bit on the hype and wait for proper coverage. Because there are some pieces out there, PC World just posted one, for example, that have had some level of hands-on with Vega Frontier Edition. But the thing is, these are pre-release tests, much like CES is a pre-release test in a sanctioned, controlled environment. And all the vendors do this. It's not just AMD. But they all do it. And there's a reason that at our outlet we don't report on numbers when we don't have an ability to actually test and collect them properly. For example, at CES, when the vendors show their new GPU, CPU, or whatever it is, with two side by side, a game running, and they lock the FPS to VSync on to indicate that they both perform the same, that's not really a valid test. All it does is show that they both can achieve 60 FPS. So we don't report on those types of things other than to say maybe that they did it, but certainly not as like a, look, this card is better than X, because it's not a controlled environment that we tested. So that's our approach to that kind of stuff. Now, that said, the tests that have been shown lately have some promise. It's okay for them to be promising. It's okay to be excited about new hardware, but with regard to hype, just always keep in mind that pre-release tests are controlled not by the independent reporters. So that means that they are going to have they're certainly not going to show you a situation where the card is underperforming. So that's not to say Vega will underperform. It's to say that keep everything within the eye of reality. We'll get to the reviews. It's an expensive card. You probably don't want to invest in something like that without seeing them anyway. And besides, Vega FE is not really a gaming GPU, as AMD themselves have said at least once or twice now. So RX Vega, we do have our eye on, and we'll probably be testing it whenever it comes out. So we'll have coverage for you eventually. But that was just something I wanted to say about the Vega Hype before there's a giant disappointment because people built themselves up to believing it would be better than 4-way SLI, whatever, at all kinds of tasks. So next topic is mining cards. So it's still a GPU topic. This is on Sapphire's front, so they've got mining edition video cards now coming out to address some of the mining, cryptocurrency mining craze. Now these mining devices are coming out for a few reasons. One of them, there's an interesting discussion right now to be had about whether or not GPUs selling out is actually a net positive for the manufacturers, for AMD and NVIDIA. On one front, they're selling out of the cards, so how could they be mad at that? On the other front though, this is a situation where one person buys 10 cards, so you end up with one person with 10 cards not gaming versus 10 gamers who become long-term customers and who hopefully, in the eyes of the company, build a relationship with that company, become brand loyalists, or start investing in other parts of the ecosystem like G-Sync and FreeSync and whatever other add-ons those companies may offer, maybe redeeming game codes and building MDF with publishers, for example. So there's two different ways to look at that. That's not what we're talking about here, though. The mining cards are being made by the AIB partners directly. Sapphire seems to be one of the first. Their AIB mining cards are basically headless GPUs for the most part. And headless with a video card means that it doesn't have any display out. So some of them have one DVI out, but a lot of them that we looked at, and I'm sure we'll have images of them, did not have any display outs. That means that they are useless as a gaming device, which is pretty interesting, and should only be used for non-gaming tasks where you're doing GPU crunch workloads on it and you don't need display out. So then why would someone buy these types of cards? And the main thing here is that they are meant for mining, but the interesting aspect is they lose a lot of the resale value that these miners are building their purchases on, because you can't turn around later and sell it to a gamer who's building a PC if it has no display out on it. The only instance where that would be feasible is if the people are trying to do Crossfire or something where they already have a primary card with display out and then a secondary doesn't need the display, but that seems like a pretty limited use case. So kills some of the value for the miners who are basing their purchases on some level of break-even plus profit after you sell the card later. But I guess the target is probably more of the more enterprising people rather than the casual home users. So that's out. The RX 560 version is $170, pretty expensive. RX 470 Mining Edition, $300, also very expensive. Very expensive. I mean, that's approaching 1070 territory before the whole mining craze. So not the best deal, but they're not meant for gaming. They're meant for theoretically making some form of money back at some point in the future. But that's the mining update. Blender also had an update, and this was for a July update coming out with a new denoiser built in, and then they also have some OpenCL optimizations and other GPU optimizations. Blender users have a lot to be excited for right now. Version 2.79 is the one expected in July, and 2.80 is coming out after that, which will feature a new real-time renderer called Eevee, which is very potentially useful for the type of people who don't want to wait around rendering PNGs forever. 2.80 will also have better cloth simulation and physics simulations like plasticity. And then at 2.79, more immediately, has a new denoiser that uses scene information. So that would be textures and model geometry that are built into the scene. It gathers info from those and then will remove noise during the render process, hopefully without losing any actual quality. As for OpenCL optimizations, this is also pretty interesting. These basically ensure that the GPU is kept at 100% load under all scenarios, so the tile size should be less relevant or irrelevant now for OpenCL rendering, because the GPU will always be utilized at 100%, which means that you don't need to worry too much about optimizing tile sizes, and also means that render times improve up to 50% in the worst case 8x8 tile size scenarios. Blender also has new shaders like the principled shader, which helps calculate the correct Fresnel for the roughness of a material. This comes alongside a metalness workflow, which helps determine whether an object is dielectric, non-dielectric with more accuracy. Also, some clarification on X299 socket compatibility. CryoRig specifically came out to say that any of their coolers supported on LGH 2011 version 3 are also supported on 2066, and this is true for all of them. So the mounting mechanism, mounting spacing for the holes, all of it is the same on LGA 2066 X299 as it was on X99. So if you had coolers that worked for one, they will work for both. So that was a clarification put out by CryoRig. It's true for everyone if you were looking into buying X299 and pairing it with a cooler that you already had. Silverstone is also expanding its power supply line for the Strider series, largely looking into new titanium certified power supplies. This includes PSUs in 1100 watt, 1300 watt, and 1500 watt capacities, part of the ST series. So ST 1100-TI, TI meaning titanium certification, ST meaning Strider series. And all of the new models are 80 plus titanium. They're all fully modular. They all have a 135 millimeter fan. And they also all offer a semi-passive operation where the fan will spin down when load is low on the power supply. Standard protections come with them, 5-year warranty. We don't know the price just yet, but it'll probably be high because they're high wattage power supplies, kilowatt plus, and they are 80 plus titanium. On the memory front, G.Skill is rolling out new DDR4 kits with higher capacities and tighter timings aimed at Intel's new X series chipsets and the X299 chipset motherboards. All of the kits will be available under the Trident Z, Trident Z RGB, or Trident Z Black series product lines. We have at least one of those kits in now. Pricing and availability are TBA, but for the speeds, they're shipping at 3600 megahertz with CL16 or 17 and a 1.35 voltage up to capacities of 16 gigabyte sticks. There will also be speeds of 3733 megahertz at CL17, 3800 megahertz CL18 or 19, 4000 megahertz CL18, and 4200 megahertz CL19 at 1.4 volts, and that's available in 8x8 gigabyte kits. Asus is adding a new add-in network card for gaming support, increased bandwidth, and better leveraging NVMe SSDs across networks, which has been a challenge up until recently. The XG-C100C supports 10 gigabit Ethernet, as well as the latest 2.5 and 5 gigabit Ethernet standards. Further, the card supports IEEE 802.1p, priority queuing and quality of service or QoS technology, which allows users to prioritize game packets over other network traffic and is somewhat competing with the likes of Killer. Asus's new NIC uses the Action Client Controller and thus requires 4 PCIe lanes. 10 gigabit Ethernet, if you're wondering, delivers around 1,000 megabits per second of network throughput, so it's quite a bit of a jump over 1 gigabit Ethernet and helps resolve the 100 megabyte per second wall that we face with 1 gigabit. And bad news for DRAM and NAND supply shortages. We've been covering this for a while now, and the goalpost keeps moving for when it's supposed to be better. So from new reports that we saw last week, one of the main ones coming from Reuters, it looks like the DRAM and NAND shortage will continue through 2017. It was originally supposed to start getting a little bit better in the second half, but now it looks like that date is moving towards 2018. Part of that is because of the major phone launch cycle coming up, particularly with the iPhone 8, and Apple, as potentially insignificant as a single product launch seems in the face of an entire industry making devices that use DRAM and NAND, Apple does command about 18% of the total supply of NAND just in general. So when they push a phone, it's a big deal, to the point where some of the device makers who use DRAM and NAND had to start buying supply months in advance to make sure they don't run out now when the iPhone 8 is really starting to ramp production or finalize production. So because of that, because of Internet of Things devices, because of new NAND processing technologies being researched in R&D labs, it looks like 2018 is when RAM prices will start to fall again. So as we've said in the past, I'm sorry if you're a new builder, bad timing. DRAM prices are high right now and will remain high, it looks like, for the foreseeable future. And finally, Gigabyte has a new Aorus 1080 Ti, I need to get this name right, WaterForce WB Extreme Edition video card, and that is going to be an open loop ready card, so it's got the block pre-installed, water block that is, and it will connect with the Fusion RGB suite that Gigabyte uses, so it will synchronize with their motherboards, which now have digital RGB LEDs. That ships with a core clock of 1607 megahertz, 1721 megahertz boost, and the GDDR5X VRAM is clocked to 11 gigahertz, so it's got a bit of an OC on it as well, but not much of one. No pricing yet, release date TBD. This looks like it'll probably be one of the last 10 ATIs launching anyway, because the generation's getting a bit old at this point, even though the card just came out a few months ago. So that's it for this time. As always, links in the description below. For more information, you can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus if you would like to help us out directly, or if you want to pick up a shirt like this one, store.gamersnexus.net. This is called the GN Graph logo shirt. We have them in tri-blend now in stock. Subscribe for more. I'll see you all next time.